I've built a few workbenches before, but this one stands out. It's bigger and far more versatile. This workbench will inspire you to get things done. Building it demands effort, but it's absolutely worth it. And I'd say it's quite stylish. I'm Glenn, and I'm ready to show you how it's made. It's been a while now since I dismantled my workspace. After so much time passed, I feel eager to get it back together. I wanted to start off feeling motivated, so I committed to doing a workbench. The workbench was constructed using approximately 5 sheets of plywood. A while back I purchased these plywood for a different project I had in mind. I never got around to that project, so after leaning them on the wall for so long, the plywood developed a bow. Of course, I'm not happy about that, but I'm not gonna let that stop me. At this point, I'm all set up and ready to go. It's always a challenge to cut large panels on a table saw. If I didn't have a table saw set up like this, I'd be using a circular saw with a guide. This project has over 75 pieces of plywood parts. With that in mind, I had to mark all the parts so I can keep track of what's what. I made a few tweaks along the way, but for the most part, I was working from a set of plans I created. When cutting a plywood panel like such, try adding support under it to catch your cutoffs. Out of 5 sheets of plywood, this is how much waste I ended up with. And the cutoffs here are ones that I can use in future projects. Aside from the changes I made later, here's a look at all the parts cut and labeled. To begin assembling the workbench, I'll start off with the legs. I begin by marking the location for the screws. When I'm building projects, I often think about how do I want to join the parts. And often my decisions are made by how much time I want to commit. In the world of DIY, you can practically do what you want. If you have a lot of time on your hand, then the rest is based on the tools you have and your skill sets. I'll use a mixture of methods in this project. Here I'll be using a bit to drill down into the plywood. Next, I'm going to apply wood glue to the adjacent part. Then align the two parts and screw them together. I'll repeat this process until I have the 4 legs built. For some parts, it's just easier to use a pocket hole jig. In a case like this, I'm joining the parts together using screws, then I'll take the dowel stick to plug the hole. And just like that, no visible screw heads. You can plug the pocket holes the same way. All the legs have been completed, and now it's time to proceed to constructing the workbench. To make sure everything goes together properly, it's always a good idea to check the squaring of things as you proceed. Although much of the work does not require the use of wood screws, I prefer to not have to wait for wood glue to fully set, so I'm using screws to speed up my workflow and added stability. Having finished this side, I would place it over here out of my way and proceed to the next part. Moving on to the next set of legs, I'll place a sheet of plywood within them. The plywood currently shows a bow, but rest assured it will straighten out as the workbench comes together. With the plywood secured to the legs, I'm going to install the next component, which seems to be a little more challenging to go in than it should have been. And this is actually a pretty good fit. Now I'll stand the legs up and place the bottom panel on top of them. If you tackle projects by yourself, it's almost impossible to do these things without clamps. Now is a good time to go ahead and mark all the location for the screws. As I wrap up the drilling, the installation of the screws, and plugging of the holes, I'll remove the clamps to access the other side. First thing is to mark and drill the holes on this side. While I'm at it, I'll prepare the two panels for the sides. Next, I'm going to take some scrap wood, place those on the floor to help hold the panels. And to secure those, I'm going to drive in pocket hole screws, then plug the hole and repeat. Now you can see that the bow still exists until I tighten up the clamps. And once I'm done adding all the screws through the panel, I'll flip the bench over. Now I'll add the remaining screws which I couldn't access prior. As the bench remained upside down, now is a good time to add the adjustable feet. To do so, I'll be using threaded inserts, large washers, and these heavy-duty feet. First, I'm going to drill the hole, install the threaded insert, and then screw the feet in. And I'll repeat that 3 more times. I overlooked a couple of the feet while drilling, but not a big deal. I just have to notch the wood below so I can create clearance. I cut some scrap parts to help me with spacing while attaching the back panel to this multi-shelf storage area. If you're building this workbench for yourself, I would suggest here think about what you would want to store in this area and make the shelves the desired height you need. If you're thinking why not make these shelves adjustable, it crossed my mind, but this is a workbench that I'll be working on pounding. I don't want a lot of rattling noise. I also think that the more fixed parts you have, the stronger the workbench would be. With the shelf installed, it's onto the front panel. So what I'm pointing out here is I want the shelf to at least hang down about 3/4 of an inch lower than the front of the shelf. This would give me a perfect spot to mount the LED strip. And if you are building this bench, of course you don't need to add LEDs if you're not into that. Even if you don't personally like LEDs, if you're a parent, I guarantee your kids will. My daughter could care less about this workbench until she saw the lights. She grabbed her flip-flops and came in the garage to get a closer look. And I got all the compliment I was going to get from her, which was, "You're making progress." Moving on to the other side, I'll be adding a panel for a larger storage area for bigger things like your drill or jigsaw or other tools you may find that fits there. As the workbench is starting to take shape, I need to install this back stretcher. I had a slight gap there, so I needed to use 2 clamps because I didn't have one long enough to pull this section in so I can attach the back stretcher. Like my previous workbench, there will be a suspended storage shelf. Here I'm cutting the 2 components for the front of the shelf. Fully constructed, this is how the shelf will look. I like to lay out the parts first and make markings so I reduce mistakes. All the parts here were glued and screwed together. After assembling, I'm going to place this inside of the workbench. Once the shelf is in place, I can add clamps and nudge it into its final position. I'll check to confirm its location, then secure. Now I can install the other components around the storage. These 2 parts are going to be joined together to make up the middle stretcher. I identified what was going to be the outside and the inside of these parts. Since both parts has a bow in the middle, I drilled pocket holes on the outside and clamped these parts together. While the parts are clamped, I'll add some wood screws. Now I'm going to center up the middle stretcher, work it into place, check the spacing, and then add the pocket hole screws. Now I'll add these additional components. which serves a few different purposes. They add some additional strength to the workbench, they pull the sides in, and they provide a mounting area for the top of the workbench. Since I'll be taking the vise from the previous workbench, I'll need to beef up this area here to expand the mounting surface. I'll apply wood glue, clamps, and a few screws. This will complete the inside part, but we need to beef it up some more. I glue all these parts together to form one block. This way I'm not fighting with multiple pieces while trying to attach them to the workbench. There's a great possibility this could be a pain to align, so I'm going to sprinkle a little sand on top of this, then align the parts and clamp. And while I'm at it, it's probably a good time to install these caps. So I'm creating this thing which I like to recognize as the tool drawer. You might find this useful and you may not. I struggle with keeping my workbench surface cleared. So my idea here is to have a drawer that pull out and I can have all my immediate hand tools in it. So not everyone have a CNC machine, which would make life a lot easier. With that in mind, I'm going to show you how to do this the manual way. I've never done bench dog holes before, but I don't see anything that's too intimidating about doing them. Technically, if it's your bench, make up your own rules. From what I gathered, the holes are about 4 inches apart in all directions. Since I'll be incorporating the Craig clamp tracks, I marked that section off first. Now I'm going to spend some time to map out the area for all the bench dog holes. I doubled up on plywood for the top of this bench, and what I'm doing here is cutting off a section for the clamp tracks, but only for the top plywood. The bottom one will go untouched. This is the first time I pivoted away from the design. Originally, I was going to route off a section of this plywood. So I actually have a 1/4 inch thick piece of metal, which is what I planned around. It's covered by rust, which means I would have had to clean it up. Then I would have to cut it to size, and it started feeling like a lot of work. With that in mind, I went to a local metal shop to see if I can get a thick piece of metal that was the same thickness as the plywood. My face lit up when I found exactly what I was looking for, until I got a price check on a 3-foot piece. $216 made me go to my truck and think about it. I caved and made the investment. I just don't have a lot of time to play with. Alright, so I'm back in the shop now and I'm gonna sit this where it needs to go. But first, I'll put a piece of masking tape on it to block direct contact with wood glue. Before moving on, I'm gonna put a round over on the bottom plywood of the workbench top. Before laminating the 2 sheets of plywood, I'm gonna check to see if I can get the bottom one completely straight. Now I'll cover the entire surface of the plywood using wood glue. As soon as I'm able to add clamps to the plywood, I'm going to relocate that piece of metal to the middle of the plywood. According to my scale, this piece of metal is just shy of 93 pounds. As the weight pressed down on the plywood, I'll still add a few screws to pull the plywood together from underneath. I wanted to make sure that enough time had passed. It's only been a few hours, but that is plenty for me to get back to work. It was crucial that the 2 parts were joined together before drilling the holes. One thing I didn't do right off the bat was to drill the holes all the way through. I had to think about the potential uses, and then it hit me that some of the accessories do need to go all the way through. That in mind, I finished drilling the holes. I'm going to shift my focus over to assembling the tool drawer. So a couple things going on here. I need to build a frame so that the drawer can operate within. Next, I'm going to put the sides on the drawer. Now I'm going to test this on top of the workbench to make sure everything moves properly, and once that's confirmed, I can move on to installing it. To make sure the frame doesn't fall apart on me as I'm trying to install it, I'm going to put in a throwaway piece temporarily to hold the front. I also marked a reference line here so I know where to place the frame. I made this little stand to act as a helping hand, which frees up my hands so I can focus on installing the frame. Here I'm cutting the front panel to the tool drawer. Finally, I'll clean that up and secure it to the front of the tool drawer. So right now I'm cutting the profile for the LED panels on the front of the workbench. I considered routing this section with the router. However, the table saw makes less mess. I struggled mightily to come up with a design that I would approve of for the front of the workbench. I came up with a number of designs, but nothing fit the bill. I didn't come up with this design until the last minute. I thought 3 of these would work. Then I did a 4th, and I was like, I wanted an odd number, so I did a 5th. And even once I was done with these, I still wasn't sure. I just set them off to the side and went on to work on other parts of the workbench. I'm going to go around and plug all of the holes. I'm going to use wood glue and a dowel stick. I plugged a lot of the visible holes and now it's time to sand. I started off with 80 grit sandpaper and went up to 120. I needed to drill 2 pass-through holes in the front of the workbench, one at the top and one at the bottom. I put a slight round over on the holes inside of the drawer. To make a simple wood filler, I took some sawdust, poured glue on it, mixed it up, and filled in any knots, gouge, gaps, or broken sections. And now the parts are ready to be finished. I place masking tape so I know exactly where to paint. So I've used this paint quite a bit in some of my past content. This is the iron ore. Can't go wrong with this one. So I went around and cut all the LEDs to the length that I needed. I need to drill some holes to pass the wires through the workbench. It's nice to have a right angle drill, but it's not needed. An attachment can go a long way if you have the right bits. While drilling the holes, I was a little aggressive with my force and knocked a piece of the plywood off. To address that, I applied some wood glue to that same chipped off piece, drilled a hole in it, and put it back. Here are all the strips that I've cut and is ready for use. The plan here is to solder on a 5 conductor wire onto the LED strip. Now any LED strips could work, but specifically I chose these because of how close the LED bulbs were. And there's some additional features like white light. To protect the solder point, I used shrink tube. I had to double up. The first one I used wasn't big enough to cover the solder joint. This was a very slow, methodical process. After soldering each cable, I had to test them before moving on to the next. For the strips that had a hard wire harness, I spliced the wires and covered the connection with shrink tubing. I was too conservative with the LED strips in this section. Now that I know the outcome, I would recommend wrapping the entire section with the strip. After attaching the strip, I routed the cable through the table and secured it with staples. These are not the strips I originally spec'd for the project. They're actually wider, so they don't fit where I wanted them to go. So rather than rerouting this piece, I decided to reposition them. When I install LED strips, I have a habit of just dabbing some hot glue right next to it. When attaching the LED strips to the front trim, it's important to look at the direction of the wire. I use tape as an indication to let me know which side the wire should exit. Now I can feed the wire harness through the pass-through hole. Now I'm going to grab some clamps, hold the trim in place, and secure it with screws from the inside. I'll repeat the same thing at the bottom and wire up the multi-storage side. I routed all the cables up through one passage on the workbench to minimize visibility of the cables. When securing the LEDs in this tight space, I found it useful to use a mirror, which gives me good visibility on what's happening. I'm gonna make up the connections with this terminal block. Rather than wasting the entire block, I cut a piece off. The terminal block is mounted in the middle of the workbench where I can easily get to it along with the controller. I installed this vise before, which was on my previous workbench. I learned my lesson from that installation, and I think it makes sense to just flip the workbench upside down and install it this way. It's quite heavy. Something I've been quite excited about is the casters. I recommend reading the reviews on these before buying them. There are a lot of good reviews on these, but there are also some unhappy customers. I personally like them, but I haven't used them to give you a true feedback on them. I'm not even following the instruction that comes with these due to the height of the workbench with the leveling feet. For my setup, I'll be using 2 wood screws at the bottom. Then I'll use 2 of the included bolts at the top. I added a separate washer because I thought the one came with these were a bit too small for my liking. The casters come with everything you need in the box. You have to do some assembling, but it's pretty straightforward. This is what I like about the casters, the ability to slide them on and take them off. I like the fact that I can park the workbench and remove the casters. It also gave me some ideas to just buy the brackets separately and then just use the same casters to move whatever bench you want around, rather than buying the entire kit every time. As you can see, the workbench is coming together. Anytime you can make your life easier, do so. I cut a few pieces of scrap wood to help me map out the shapes. This piece of wood is going to help me set the height, keeping the shape centered from top to bottom. The next piece of wood is going to help me start off the spacing for the shapes. Here I'll use the nail gun to temporarily hold these. Here's a close look at the pen nailer. The nails are very small and they don't leave much damage. I'm now using a different piece of spacer wood, which will be used to set the spacing between the shapes. Now once that's done, I'm going to take the same piece of wood that I started off the entire thing with, and it fits perfectly at the end. As long as the spaces between the shapes are identical, the starting and the ending point can be slightly different from the spacing between the shapes. To secure the shapes, I'm going to measure from the outside and transfer that to the inside so I know exactly where to screw. I'll repeat this until all the parts are firmly attached. Now I'll sit the top in place, but before I secure it, I have some additional things to do. I have the universal tracks that's going to go in this section. The installations seem to be pretty clear on installing these. There are 2 screws at each point. I noticed that the screws on the inside will definitely interfere with the frame of the workbench. This is not something I accounted for during the design, however, it's not a big deal. To address this, I drilled a small pilot hole. I flipped the top over and drill from the bottom. I want to countersink the heads so they don't interfere. Once I confirm the head of the boat will be low enough, I'll drill the hole all the way through. This longer screw is going to be on the outside and this shorter one is going to be on the inside. Since I modified the plywood, I needed a smaller bolt. I ended up cutting the screws so I didn't have to buy new ones. Now for the outside holes, I'm just going to drill a hole all the way through and that should be fine. Things that I used in this project will be linked in the video description. As shown, the track system comes with everything you need to install it. So to reiterate, my modified screws will go on the inside and the original ones will go on the outside. Out of 26 holes, apparently I drilled one bad one, but it's fixable. I'm just going to use the drill bit to open up the hole a little more. If you get as lucky as me, everything slides on and you just tighten it up from below. Once the top is centered on the workbench, now I can go ahead and add some screws to secure the top to the workbench. For extra strength, I'm going to add some brackets to secure the top to the bottom. Early on in the project, to save myself from any shop injuries, I used the file to clean up the edge and put a slight round over on the metal part. I'm nearing the time to attach this piece of metal to the workbench. When I thought about adding a 1/4 inch sheet of metal to the workbench, my initial thought was to epoxy it to the wood. With the weight of this slab of metal, I decided to pivot in a different direction. Due to the thickness of it, I felt like I could drill holes in it, tap it, and use screws to mount it to the workbench. Once the holes are complete, I'm going to carefully thread them. I often get nervous when I use these because they can break. So when I'm using them, I tighten. When I feel tension, I back it up and go again. I got about 3/8 of an inch of thread to go in. I think that's good enough to secure it to the top. I transferred the measurements from the threaded holes from the metal panel over to the workbench. Then I drilled 2 3/4 inch holes. This size hole should give me a little wiggle room if I'm slightly off. Now that the metal is in place, I just need to align it and add the screw. I found these handy magnetic tool holder, which I thought would make a great addition to the workbench. On the previous workbench, I had 2 of these DIY accessory holders. I took one off to add on this workbench. It's a great spot to hang a drill or a driver and even multiple measuring tapes. The channel I have here for the LED strips could be a spot for collecting dust. While it's not a big deal, it could look a little neater. One thing that came to mind was to use this LED cover, and as you can see, I snipped off the corner so it doesn't interfere with the LED strip. This will diffuse the LEDs and also make it look more presentable to the eye. When I'm ready, I'll use some hot glue to hold it in place. While there is much more that I can do, I'll call this bench complete. This video is so long, I think I should just focus on giving you guys an overview on what was done. If you'd like, I'd love to create you a video to show you how you can use this bench, especially if you're a beginner. I think it would be helpful to show you guys it in action with a more in-depth overview. You are now looking at a dramatic improvement from any workbench I've ever built. What we have here is a large workspace on casters that makes this workbench easy to maneuver. Simply adjust the leveling feet until your workbench is leveled. Now all you have to do is remove the wheels so there's one less thing to kick in the shop. On either side of the workbench you have storage, very convenient to place random things. This is the more versatile side. Down here you have a perfect spot to place drills, batteries, and more. All the way at the top you have more space to store tools and also a spot to store accessories for the workbench. In the middle you have this pull-out tray. Nice little finger grip and a bunch of random spots to hold your tools as you work. Every project may require a different set of tools, but reality is there's space to hold them as you need them. The inspiration here is to try and keep your workbench cleared as you work. The only caveat here is you have to put your tools up before you close this drawer. Oh, and did I mention soft close? Looking at this bench from a distance, it has a nice elegant feel to it. The design on the front serves zero purpose other than to look good. This side of the workbench simply gives you more storage. When you're standing on this side, you can see lots of storage space. There's this accessory holder, perfect for hanging drills and measuring tapes. And just below you have this strong magnetic tool holder. I think it's a perfect spot to stash a few hand tools. On the opposite side, I have this large vise with quick release. And there's quite a few things going on the top. Along the top you have this universal clamp track, right next to 40 bench dog holes. The top is 1.5 inch thick throughout, including the thick steel section. I'll get more in depth with this some other time. Having this on the workbench will allow me to do more things like bending a nail, bending a plate, things that you'll need a hard surface for but don't want to damage your workbench. Bench dog holes have not been part of my workflow in the past. I've overlooked how much of an asset they could be to your workflow. As a DIYer, I'm used to just making things work or finding a way around. All right, guys, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. I know it was a very long video, but I hope it was beneficial to watch. And like always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed it.